Today we are going to be learning how to go underwater and speak with the fishies. So let's have a look at today's challenge. Today we're going to be looking at making a fish talk to us. To do that, we're going to be introducing lists. Now, when I was in college, lists were one of the hardest things in programming that I learned. And Scratch has made it really easy to learn. So this is going to be a really fun lesson for you guys. And of course, by the end of the lesson, we'll be able to talk with the fishies. So now let's have a look at adding the sprites. You can use a fish sprite for this one, guys, or if you want to create your own fish, I'm sure you all know how to do that as well. Don't forget you can change the backdrop as well. You don't have to use the backdrop that I'm using. Maybe you'd like to use a desert backdrop and use it for a flying fish, or maybe you'd like to use the Aku Aku mask, or whatever you'd like to do. Just have a little bit of fun with it yourselves. So let's have a look at the first bit of code we're going to be doing. And it should look a little bit familiar to you guys because it's the exact same code we used in the first lesson. Here we have our set rotation style left to right. We're going to be turning 15 degrees at the start and then forever moving across the screen, and if we touch the edge, then we'll bounce. So that's fine, and that's okay to do. Let's have a look at doing that first of all. If you want to have a look at the full project, you guys, you can check out Lesson 5, Fish Tank Conversations, and that'll show you everything we have done. I'm also going to upload our starter project as well, which I'll use for this lesson just to show you guys what we can do. So let's have a look at the lesson now. In fact, let's start from the very beginning. That'll be the best way to do it. So here we have when our green flag is clicked, we can say, let's set the rotation style to left and right. That way our fish knows which way to turn. And then we can turn it 15 degrees, or if you want to, you can turn him 17 degrees. As long as he's not facing left and right, back and forth, and he's always turned a little bit at the start of the game, then the project is going to work fine. So we can use our forever loop. We can tell him to move. 10 steps would be a little bit quick for me, so I'm going to change it down to 5 steps. So as long as he's moving 5 steps at a time, I'm okay with that. Then we can use our if on the edge bounce, and we can start to see our project going in the direction we'd like to already. So that's already loads of the programming done, and we've done it all in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks of code, which is fantastic because if you were doing this in any other coding language, this would easily take you at least 3 hours to do. And we've done it in, what, 5 minutes? Not even. Now we're going to have a look at the messy data. So if you can imagine data in computers, they're a bit like this pile of books. And what do we really need to do with all these books really? Well, we need to be able to find them and know exactly what we want them to do. Let's say we had a book on sprites, or we had a book on maths, or we had a book on something that's really important for programming, like variables. And we were looking through these books and we couldn't find anything. Well, that's what we use lists for, you guys. So we use lists to order these books, and then when the computer needs to find something, you can go straight to the one you want to use. So let's say we take that book on sprites and we know everything we need to know on sprites, and we take a book on variables, we know everything we need to know on variables. And that's exactly what lists do. So they take that data and they make it available for us to find. And the same way the computers use it too. So we can add all of the data we need to use into a list and make sure that it's organized and labeled for us to find. So in Scratch, if you've got lots of things to talk about with your fish, well, then you'll need to use a list to group them all together. And in Scratch, the lists look a little bit like this. This is an example of a list that I made earlier on, and it's called sayings. So I gave the list a name, and we called the list sayings. Then, when I add my sayings to the list, they pop up in the screen in the list that looks a little bit like this. And you can scroll down, you can see all of the different questions that I've put into it. And you can see loads more that I've done. But for the moment, I want to focus on adding to our list now. So let's have a look at creating that list and making sure that it works for us. The first thing we need to do, guys, is go into the Data tab, click on our Make a List button, and then we can say, is the list for all sprites or is it for this sprite only? Well, that doesn't really matter because this is the only sprite I have in my project, so we'll use for this sprite only. Then I need to make sure to call my list sayings. And there you can see my list is in the top right corner already, and I can make it a lot bigger if I need to. Here is my variable for the list. And now if I want to add something into the list, we can make a new when the green flag is clicked and use an add block to add whatever question we'd like, and it'll appear in our list. So let's have a look at adding a few questions in now. So we'll just grab another when our green flag is clicked. We'll add in our thing to sayings. And if you want to have a look, guys, there are loads of blocks to do with lists as well. When you make a new list, you'll be able to see all these blocks. So they're not there when it just isn't made. So if you don't have a list in your project, you won't see these blocks. But once you've made a list and you call it sayings, you'll see all of these blocks up here as well. And we'll go through a few of them in today's lesson. First of all, we need to add a few questions like, what should we talk about? And then we need to add a couple more as well. So we can add loads of questions in. We can say, I like worms, because I think that's what fish likes. Don't fishes like worms? Pretty sure. And then we can ask the player to tell them what they like. What do you like? And we can add that into the list as well. So now when we click the green flag, we have our questions, what should we talk about? And I like worms, what do you like? So we can add loads more to this as well. And if you want to make lots and lots, you can just click and add more to it. We have a thing that, let me see what we can say here. I like coding. My favorite game is Go Fish. And what would you like to talk about next? Oops, what would you like to talk about next? Oh, question mark. Very important when you're asking a question. If you just tell somebody what you would like to talk about next, it doesn't really have the same effect, does it? And then the last question we can add is something nice and simple like, as if the fish is really thinking about what you've just said. And as you can see here, I have my delete all of sayings as well. Now the reason for that, guys, and it's a very important one, is because if I run the project again, and I check my sayings list, you can see that we have duplicates of the question. If I run it again, we now have 14 questions, and they're all the same questions, which isn't what we really want, is it? So what we'll do is we'll drag our delete one of sayings block. We'll use our drop down arrow and we can say we could delete the last thing, we could delete the first thing, or we can delete all of the things in the sayings list. So now, if we hit the green flag, we can see the 6 questions in our list. And that's what we wanted to do, so we can get rid of our list and we can see the fish running around. And we're able to add to our list. Let's just take a moment now, just for a second, to say, what have we done? We've learned how to make a list. We've learned how to add things to sayings, which is the list that we created. And we're able to use the blocks for a list as well. So let's just take a moment to have a look at what these blocks do. So the first one we've used, which was add a thing to the block, which we've seen just over here. Then we used our delete one of sayings and we changed the drop-down menu to say all. If you wanted to add a certain one in after the first 6 questions, let's say you wanted to add another question in so that it was definitely going to say it in the list, but it wasn't going to say it first, you can use the insert and then you can type in your question. So I'll just make a little Q over the top of it there. At whatever number you'd like, whether it's 1 or 7 or 8, and if it's only got 6 in it, you can say last into the sayings list. And if you don't want to use them at all, we'll have a look at using the replace item later on in the lesson. Then down here, and this is what I really wanted to get to, is you can see that we have some rounded edges, which means these blocks are used as variables. So what does item 1 of sayings mean? Well, it says it's going to take the first question in our sayings list, which was, what was that again? Let me just check. Item 1 would be, what should we talk about? So if we take item 1 of sayings and get the fish to say it for us, we can click on it and say, what should we talk about? If we change it to item 3, and we get the fish to say, he says he likes coding now as well. So we can use these variables from our list to do a little bit extra. And of course at the bottom we have our show list and hide list as well, which is great for if you want to show people what you've added to the list, and then for us getting it rid of the screen as well. Then if you need to, and this is what's really cool about lists, if you need to say if sayings contains the word coding or contains a specific sentence, you can use it as an operator to do some extra cool stuff. But for the moment, let's get back to the fun stuff. So let's say we have lots of things to say. Like, what would you like the player to know about yourself? Maybe you'd like to talk to the player about... Maybe you'd like to talk to them about your favorite Sunday morning. So what do you like to do on Sundays? Maybe you want to tell them that my favorite game is, let me see, I would say Lego Dimensions at the moment. And then you can always ask the question, what is yours? So lots of little questions and a bit of fun to have with your player as well. So loads of things you can talk about with, and you can add it to your fish. So what question should the fish ask you? That's a really important question, because at this point in the project, guys, all you guys need to do is add up as many of these questions as you want. And maybe we'll take a break for a moment. We'll take a little look at the finished project, and you can have an idea of how it works when it's completed. So we have our first question, what shall we talk about? Let's talk about coding. And the fish doesn't want to talk about coding, so he says, what else? Maybe we'll talk about games. And then he asks us, what else should we talk about? So we have to have loads of things for this fish, so he's never happy with what we want to talk about. How about food? So he says, my favorite film is Finding Nemo. What is yours? Well, if my favorite film at the moment would be Finding Dory once it comes out. And his favorite song is Under the Sea. So now we're having a real conversation with the stuff that we've just typed into our fish, and we can say, what's your favorite song? Well, I do know that song. What is my favorite song? And now the fish would like to know more about ourselves. So now we can say, well, what about you? My favorite song. What is my favorite song at the moment? My favorite song would be something that I've heard on the radio, which I can't think of at the moment, so I'll say Counting Crows. And I like to swim every day. Sometimes it's nice to talk too. So now we can see that the fish is really enjoying the conversation as well. So you can start off the conversation with what questions would you like the fish to ask, and maybe you can add in some extra bits for the player to find out about yourself as well. So to get our fish asking these questions, just like we did, you want to be able to ask the question, what is your first question? So what should we talk about is always a good first question. Then you need to add a loop as well. So let's have a look at what the loop would look like. Well, we can use our ask block to say, what should we talk about? And then we have our forever loop. We have a variable in there called choice. We have another question block. And we can use the replace item of sayings block as well. So let's have a look how all of these blocks work by just adding them into the project first of all. Nice and simple, just to see how these all work. We'll use our ask block first. Say ask what's Or what should we talk about? And then we can use our forever loop as well to just add in some extra blocks as well. Now I said we were going to be making a variable, so we'll make a new variable for this sprite only called choice. And this will be the choice of sayings that we get the fish to say. So we'll just set choice to 0 for the moment, and we'll come back to it in just a moment. Then we'll get our ask block again. And we'll just leave it in there for the moment. You don't have to change anything in there, just leave it blank. And then lastly, we'll go back into our data tab. We'll check out the list blocks again, and we're going to use the replace item 1 of sayings with thing. So what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to create a random variable that says 1 to the length of sayings. So that's from the length of sayings to the first one in the list. In order to do that, and because it's a random variable, we're going to need to use an operator, pick random. So if we set our choice to pick random and 1 to 10, well, how many questions do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we could put in 8 there. Absolutely could. That's one way to do it. But just in case you decide to add more questions and more answers, because easily way more fun when you have at least 20 to start with, then you can add in the variable length of sayings. And then that will mean that it'll always pick a random number between 1 and the last question in the sayings list. So that does mean then you can add in as many list questions as you'd like. So you can ask a question from the list then. Instead of using a blank question, we can ask the question from the list, and then if you'd like to, we can replace the question with the answer that you gave. So to do that, we're going to use the variable. We're going to be using the variable of item blank of sayings, and we're going to chase that item blank to the variable choice, which means we'll have a random number picked out by choice, and then we'll set it to ask whichever item choice is equal to from the sayings list, and then we'll wait for the player to answer. Once they have, we can replace that item, we can replace that question with the answer that the player gave. So now we're starting to see how lists work as well. Like we can see that we can add games. We can easily have a bit of fun with, we can add items to our list. We can have a little bit of fun with random choices as well. We can get them to say random choices. And then we can replace those choices in the list as well. Now, if you want to make as many questions as you can, if you want to hold on to all the questions that you add to the quiz as well, you don't have to use replace item 1. You can use add thing as well. So let's have a look. The first thing we're going to do is add the ask question. So we're going to use add item 1. And instead of saying item 1, we're going to use the variable choice. Then we're going to use replace item choice with the sayings. And instead of using thing, we are of course going to use the answer variable as well. And that's not to say, guys, you could do that. That's absolutely fine to do. Or you could add the add answer to sayings and then watch as your list grows and grows and grows. And then we get random questions from the fish and random answers from the fish as well. And then each time we go back to the loop, the length of sayings is changed, so we can constantly be adding more and more and more to it. So maybe we'll leave it at that, and if you want to, you can check out in the starter project, you can use the add answer to the list, and if you want to see how to use the replace item, you can check out the finished project here. So now we have some key points to talk about as well, guys. We've looked at managing the data with our variables and lists. We can set the variable to pick a random number between 1 and the length of sayings. We're able to replace items in a list as well, using replace item choice with the sayings with answer. Or we can use the add block as well. One thing to remember though, guys, is to not forget to delete the list when you begin. So if you have played through the list and you'd like your friend to play it, don't forget to delete all of the sayings first of all and let them start again, let them enjoy the project just as you did while you were building it. And I'm just going to do a quick check, make sure. And my delete all of sayings is there at the top. So we're okay there. And now we can have a look at your turn. So what we need to look at in this lesson, you guys, is creating a sprite that's going to ask you loads of questions. And of course, the more questions that you add, the better. Don't forget to add a loop to ask more questions again. And then, of course, you can have your fish conversations with your little fishy. Let's check out this project as well just to see. So you can see in this project I've added loads more questions. And we can have a look at some of the questions that we've done there. We've got, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. My favorite food is worms. What about you? I've got a nice one. What? When you really shock the fish. We've got, how are you today? What is coding? Maybe what is an algorithm? We've got some ones as well. How do you live on land without the water? Maybe you need to tell the fish how people live every day. And as we can see, we have our choice, and we can ask the question choice and then replace the choice with the answer. So I like to swim every day. Sometimes it's nice to talk to. I think it's nice to talk as well. It is fun to talk. And so what do you like to do on Sundays? Well, I like to watch movies. And now we can start to see some of the questions that I've put in since we started playing. If we look through the list, we can see that it doesn't say, I think it is fun to talk anywhere in here. But because we've replaced the item in choice with the answer, that's what it says now. So now we can see, if we check out our list, let's see if I can find it there very quickly. There we have it, number 20. I think it is fun to talk. What did number 20 used to be if we just count down from it? Let me see, there might be an easier way. The length is 28, so if we count backwards from 28, we got 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, and 20. So what it used to say, I like to swim every day, sometimes it's nice to talk to, it now says, I think it's fun to talk. And this is one of the hardest things when you're learning about lists, you guys. So I struggled with this in college. If you struggled with it in today's lesson, give me a quick email. And you can always email me at kids.coding@shawacademy.com. But if you didn't struggle with today's lesson, then maybe I should probably talk to you about the next lesson that we're going to have, because it's a really, really interesting lesson. We're going to be making games in Scratch. We're going to be learning how to jump, and we're going to be learning how to move your sprite across and back and forward across the screen. We're going to be doing a little bit of animation as well, guys. So we'll look at making loads of costumes for our sprites. And then we'll be looking how to change the costumes as we move. Of course, it wouldn't really be that fun if all we could do was jump around and move left and right. So obviously we're going to add coins to the game as well. We're going to be looking at collecting all these coins and getting the best high score that we can.